I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't expecting to make this video again, but based on the immense support from last time, I felt like it was a comparison worth revisiting. But this time, we'll be doing a lot more than just opening and closing a bunch of applications to truly see how well each OS does in terms of utilizing hardware and software. So as usual, we have the same 5 operating systems, XP, Vista, 7, 8.1, and 10, all of them fully updated except this time, XP is running the 64-bit version, so it'll be able to utilize the 8GB of RAM that the computer has. Speaking of RAM, this is the hardware we're working with. Just as a little refresher, again, just like last time, this shouldn't really affect anything in terms of the operating system, so without further ado, let's dig straight into it. Starting off things simple, I wanted to do a login and logoff test. Now, unlike starting up a computer, logging in and logging off is something we all pretty much do every day. That is, if you own a computer. So, with logging off, Windows 8.1 was blazing fast, followed by Windows 7, 10, and Vista, which were very close in terms of speed, while Windows XP was dead last. Surprisingly, this looks very similar to my conclusion from last time, where I said XP was the worst and 8.1 was the best. This doesn't really correlate with that, but I just found it as a funny coincidence. Ironically though, logging into the computer was a completely different story. Windows XP was the best, while Windows 10 and 8.1 were the absolute worst. So, pretty much straight down the line you were being slower here. So, logging in and logging off are completely different stories in terms of speed. Moving on to a different kind of test, I wanted to see how RAM was affected by each OS, and I did this in 2 different ways. First, I just simply checked the amount of RAM being used in Task Manager, and unsurprisingly, Windows XP took up the least amount of RAM, and then there was a little bit of a jump usage with Windows Vista, generally staying the same with 7 and 8.1, and then another spike with Windows 10. So, the rumors are true, Windows 10 does take up a lot more RAM than their predecessors. I also wanted to do a kind of real-world test, where I opened a bunch of tabs in Google Chrome until the RAM capacity reached 5GB, mostly to see how each OS utilizes and manages each tab and which one is the most optimized, and here are the results for that. Now, I did want to reiterate that these were all running the same version of Chrome, version 49, just so I could be as accurate as possible, and these results basically mean that older is better. The older 3 operating systems managed to hold up around 60 tabs, while the 2 newer ones only managed to hold up around 50, Windows 7 being the best here. Next up, CPU management. Now, doing the same thing for the RAM, I checked the CPU usage for all of these in Task Manager while nothing was being run in the background, and they're all basically the same. I mean, like a 0.5% difference barely means anything. I'd rely more on the benchmarks for something like this because it's kind of hard to do a real-world test with the CPU. I did try and do this while running a YouTube video. It was a complete disaster, and I just chose to stick with the benchmarks instead, which will come later in the video. However, something I could measure was the temperature of the CPU, and I did this using a program called RealTemp if you're wondering how I did this. Now, I did have to do some averaging, but I did try my best to be as accurate as possible. So, as you can see, Windows 7 was the coolest of the 5 operating systems, whereas XP was the hottest, and everything else was pretty much in the middle. It was pretty interesting to find out that there was almost a 10-degree gap between XP and 7. On the complete other spectrum, I wanted to see what was the hottest temperature the CPU could get to under a CPU stress test. Now, based on the results, it looks like they're generally the same, but Windows 10 for some reason has a 4 to 5 degree difference among all of them. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but there you go. Moving on to the battery test, this was definitely one of the most time-consuming tests I have ever done, but it was so worth it at the end to see it side by side, and results were actually pretty shocking. So, here I got a bunch of different programs loaded, including Audacity, Chrome with 5 tabs, which includes a YouTube video, Adobe Reader, and all that stuff all running on battery on each of these OSs, and remember, all of them were unplugged at the exact same time at full charge. So, out of nowhere, Windows XP did the absolute worst on this test. Like, I don't know why, but there was such a big gap between XP and 4th place that I needed to cut the video. I'm not trying to be biased here, but I'm actually very surprised that XP performed like this compared to the others. And second last was Windows 7, which is followed by Windows Vista, and believe it or not, the 2 most recent operating systems actually outperformed the 3 older ones, Windows 8 just dominating all of them. I was pretty surprised because I thought the older OSs consumed less power, but it just might be worse battery management, which is something I wasn't expecting. A fast connection is something we all want, and how does a different version of Windows affect speeds? Well, I can't really say. I did a trial of 10 tests for each OS and picked the best scores for each, and well, it looks very inconsistent. Windows 7 had an overwhelmingly high score, while Windows Vista had the lowest score, which is strange because they're basically the same operating system. But unlike download speed, upload speed had somewhat of a pattern. Newer is actually better here. 8.1 had an overwhelmingly high score, whereas XP had the absolute worst score, a 25 megabyte difference, which is a difference I wasn't expecting. And here's audio editing. I did want to open a few applications for this video as well, so launching Audacity at the same time on all of these, and well, Windows Vista was the fastest, finally winning for the first time in this video, and a lot of ties in here as well. Actually, rendering an audio file itself was very fast on all of these, so I did have to slow it down to see which one did it the fastest, and apparently, the three most recent OSs did it the best in a three-way tie, but honestly, they were all so fast that I doubt the operating system will impact it that much anyways, but then again, it wasn't a very big audio file I was rendering either. And because I missed this from the previous video, I wanted to open an audio file in all of these, and it was pretty much straight down the line, so XP was the quickest and Windows 10 and 8.1 were the slowest of the bunch. Just as a reminder, all of these were using the latest version of Windows Media Player that each OS can use. Now for the video editing test. I ran into a lot of issues with Windows XP because I couldn't find a free video editor to use with the 64-bit version of XP, and I ended up switching to the 32-bit version just to be able to find a compatible video editor, and even then, XP is using a slightly older version. But anyways, after rendering the same video editing project in all of these OSs, Windows 7 and 8.1 won by a landslide. They were both the absolute fastest, they rendered the entire video the fastest, and the 1080p 30 FPS video was ready to be watched. Sometime later, Windows Vista does come third place, which is a pretty reasonable placing for an operating system of this age, and then Windows 10 does come fourth. So, wow, I don't know what happened between Vista and XP, but the difference in rendering time was so large that by the time Windows 10 finished rendering the video, Windows XP wasn't even halfway done. And I suspect this has something to do with the 32-bit version of XP and its RAM limitation. But for those curious, the video editor being used is called VSDC Free Video Editor, and it served its purpose for this test. Also, as another application opening test, I wanted to see which OS could fully open and load a PDF the quickest. So for this one, I wanted to wait until the entire application was fully loaded up, not just which could show it up first, and there were varied results, but on the bright side, Windows Vista won its second test, so there we go. Next, I wanted to unzip a very large zip file to see which one could extract all the contents of it the fastest. Just like some previous tests, I did have to speed up this one because again, the file was pretty large, but anyways, Windows 8.1 does come first, followed by Windows 7, then Windows 10, and then Windows XP, and finally Windows Vista does come fifth. And I'd say these results don't prove that much because it's somewhat varied, and I was just kind of curious as to what would happen. And once again, the moment we've all been waiting for, the benchmarks. So using benchmark data I've gathered from CPU-Z, for the single-threaded score, it looks like Windows XP earned the gold medal by a huge margin actually. My theory is that this is because of the kinds of CPUs that were present during the XP days when there weren't many threads or cores and it was kind of optimized for that. But for the multi-threaded scores, I can happily say that scores generally got better as newer OSs were released, Windows 8.1 being the king here. So you know, it's really good to know that Microsoft is actually improving over time and not just sitting at their desks playing solitaire or something like that. And for the final benchmark, I wanted to see which OS did the best in terms of GPU performance. The benchmark I'm using is 3D Mark 9, which is a pretty old version of 3D Mark, but I wanted to be as fair as possible with Windows XP. Also, keep in mind that this is being done with integrated graphics, so no discrete graphics cards or anything like that. And similar to the last benchmark, I can happily say the same, that as time went by, graphical performance also improved, so I'm pretty happy about that, especially about Windows 10. And I wanted to end things off with the absolute most important thing, and that was comparing the blue screen of death on each of these operating systems. So, yeah, so, they're good. So what's my conclusion? Well, honestly, mostly the same as last time. I'd still say don't choose an operating system solely based on its speed. You should still mostly focus on its features and overall reliability. And just like last time, I still think 8.1 was the best and XP was the worst, because for the more significant tests like battery, video editing, Wi-Fi, and all the important stuff, XP did underperform and 8.1 did unusually well. But remember, I just drew my own conclusion. I'm interested in seeing what everyone else's opinion is, so comment what you think was the best and worst OS. Anyways, that's just about it. I really hope you all enjoyed the video. Anything from a like, comment, or sub is always appreciated and helps out the channel a ton. I'm sorry it took this long, but man, my computer just can't handle putting together 5 streams of 1080p video. I'm not even kidding, parts of this video took over 21 hours to render. Yeah, 21 hours, but it was all worth it at the end to bring you all a worthy comparison. So, thanks for watching and I'll see you all later.